Great Scott!
Are you a sports fan who loves to have a good laugh?
Oh, yeah!
Then you're in the right place.
I'm gonna make him an offer again.
Life moves pretty fast.
Patriots win the
Welcome
Super Bowl!
to the Man Cave Chronicles.
Brady has his fifth!
Welcome to another episode of the Man Cave Chronicles podcast, the podcast of top culture where everyone has a story. I'm your host, Elias, and you can find me on Twitter at the MCC Podcast. My guest this week, you've seen him as George McFly in Back to the Future Part 2 and Part 3. You've seen him as Teddy Conway in Pell Rider. My guest, Jeffrey Weissman. Jeffrey, welcome to the cave.
Hey, it's dark in here.
So, how are you, man? What's going on with you?
Hey, I'm here with you. I'm having a pretty good day. It's a beautiful day, actually.
Yeah.
What am I doing inside?
What do you
Maybe I could take this outside. It's gorgeous out.
What is the weather like out there? I'm calling from Massachusetts.
Oh, I'm on the West Coast where it's probably about 82 degrees, a nice sunny day. It's funny because though it's starting to feel like fall already. It's just 2/3 of the way through September, and it's really feeling like fall.
Yeah. What's the lowest it gets around your area during the winter?
During the winter?
Yeah, fall and winter.
I'm out in the country a little bit north of San Francisco, up in the wine country, and we'll get down to freezing once in a while.
Okay.
But nothing like what you're going to get back there. We don't get anywhere near too far below freezing, but once in a while, I think every 10 years there's a freak storm that dusts the local hills with snow.
Yeah. That's not too bad.
No.
So you've had an interesting career. You've worked in stage, television, movies, commercials, and but I want the listeners to get a little bit more about you. Where are you originally from?
My mother.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in L.A. I'm a Hollywood kind of kid who grew up wanting to be in show business, and my parents really didn't want me to be in show business, so they kind of kept me from pursuing it until I got out of high school and I was going to do what I wanted. And they started helping me a little bit. That's how I kind of got my foot in the door, because I was wanting to be on sets of big movies, and so there was a company offering waiver type extra work to wannabes. You paid them I forget what it was, $60 or $90, and then they'd put you on sets. And that's how I started doing some background work on films like Zemeckis' first film, I Want to Hold Your Hand, and I was a Ringo fan in that, and the film FM, and The Rose with Bette Midler, and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, where I got brainwashed by Alice Cooper as one of those crazy Boy Scouts. But ultimately doing extra work is not very satisfactory for an actor wanting to tell stories.
Yeah.
And I had different casting directors and folk tell me, you got to get good training. And so I set my sights on that, and that brought me up to the San Francisco Bay Area, where I got into the American Conservatory Theater, and really fell in love with the Bay Area. It's nothing like Los Angeles, where kind of anything goes in San Francisco. You can be your freaky self. It doesn't matter if you're gay or lesbian or mentally ill. You're treated like everyone else. You kind of dealt with respect no matter who or what you are. Whereas in LA, it seems like everyone's self-conscious and afraid to be themselves, and everyone's struggling and knifing each other in the back for success. And so it was kind of refreshing for me. And I was going to ACT and San Francisco State doing my intermediate studies when I fell into an opportunity to screen test for a major motion picture. And I had a hot new agent out of the William Morris Agency pursue me, and I screen tested with Ali Sheedy to be the David role in War Games.
Okay. And
that agent brought me back to Los Angeles, because whether or not I got that part, she was going to represent me and help me launch a career, sort of my childhood dream of, being in Hollywood. So I went back down to LA and had about a 20-year run before the traffic drew me out. I just drove me out rather. I was becoming kind of a monster on the freeway because I'd see people cutting each other off and cutting me off, and I would like take it personally, and I was like, I can't do this. This is not me. So I decided it was time to support my wife in her career in the wine industry. So I've moved up to the wine country where I live.
Yeah. Now you mentioned War Games. That was you went for the part that Matthew Broderick got?
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah, the day I tested, the original director Martin Brest saw it as a very heavy dramatic piece, and he had to find a really great new young non-actor talent that he could put in the role, and he had open calls in like 5 different cities in Seattle and New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, and I got the screen test. I think I may have been the only actor who came in through those open calls. The other actors, Dana Carvey and John Stockwell and Eric Stoltz and all that, they all came in through agents.
Okay.
And a couple weeks into shooting, Martin Brest was released, and John Badham ended up finishing the film because I think he saw it. Martin Brest had a different vision as opposed to the sort of lighter, almost comedic War Games film that it ended up being. Not that it was comedic, but it was lighter hearted in tone than I think the seriousness that Martin wanted. Yeah. And the executives kind of butted heads during the process.
So you mentioned you did a lot of background work. So what was like your first gig like in the acting in the world after doing all that background work?
Well, I can never stop doing stage. I love doing live theater. So I was doing live shows all during the period that I was studying, and then after moving back to LA after the War Games audition, I was kind of a hot item, so a lot of doors opened up for general auditions, general interviews, and various auditions that were looking for young talent. And I eventually landed a tiny co-star role in the 4th segment, George Miller's segment of Twilight Zone movie. Okay. Which, when that audition came in, it was a total surprise because it was 3 months after the accident, which I was sure was going to just stop that film in the water. But Spielberg got enough footage of that segment to finish it and decided he wanted to carry on and finish the whole film. So it was a bit of a shock, but I went in and met George Miller, who was a lovely human being. And we got along very well, and he cast me in what was pretty much a small passenger role. In fact, I think my seat was right across the aisle from John Lithgow, so a lot of the time the camera was at my seat. But in rehearsals, we came up with different lines and bits of business, and I'm on camera a little bit. And it was a really lovely experience to work with that ensemble and George Miller. Yeah.
So before we went on the air, you mentioned you did improv while you were studying and everything. Tell us a little bit about that.
Improv has always been something that I've worked on. As an actor, a starving actor, you diversify to make a living. And one of the things I did often were murder mysteries. And improvising during murder mysteries is key. Improvising when on auditions, when a script isn't fully developed or they just have an outline with characters. I also work a lot doing festivals like Renaissance fairs and Charles Dickens Christmas fairs, where a lot of the time you're improvising. And so building an improv muscle has been important. At one point, I started working with improv groups around Los Angeles, finding some were, not so much improvising. A lot of them were being creative and thinking about gags before they'd go on stage, and which wasn't true improv. And then finally finding a group of wonderful folk that I started jamming with out of the Groundlings and various other improv training programs. And we just do our jams together. And out of those jams came a group that I was in called the Comedy Omelet. And then when the Omelet broke up, I took those who were interested in staying together and I became the artistic director of a group called the Flying Penguins. Okay. And then the Flying Penguins became the varsity players for a newly formed Los Angeles Theater Sports, which is based in more like narrative improv, but done in the style of like a sporting event to get audience participation really upped. And that group, which we started, I guess, in '89, I want to say, is still extant, doing amazing work as an impro in Los Angeles. They're based in Los Angeles, but they tour around, and they'll do full on improvised shows based on Jane Austen or Shakespeare or Tennessee Williams or musicals. Just really an amazing, talented group that people out of Whose Line are in, like Michael McShane and Brian Lohman and Greg Proops will join them once in a while. Like Dan O'Connor and Edie Patterson O'Connor are heading that up, and they're really terrific people. And they also have training for people who are really serious about narrative improv.
Yeah. When you did improv, did you enjoy interacting with the audience?
Oh yeah, on so many levels, because it's very much please the audience by taking a suggestion that they give and seeing where it takes you. You are the fool of the tarot card going off the cliff, trusting the skies to take you and take you wherever it's going to go. And you really can't sort of try to guide. Well, you can guide it, but you can't try to, shape it. And if it's a truly collaborative, you've got to go with what people are giving you. And if what people are giving you is fun, and if you take the equation, if that is true, then this must be true, then it goes to new levels of God knows where it's going to go. And anything goes. It's very much like child play when you're little and you're really using your imagination wholeheartedly. Yeah. And it's done by adults.
So so in between work, I read that you worked at Universal Studios and you did a lot of you played Stan Laurel and Charlie Chaplin. And how did you fall into that? And how did you practice those impressions?
Well, there's multiple questions there. I was in between television and film gigs, and I needed some work to pay the bills. And I had a buddy who actually played Stan Laurel, had a lookalike company. Jeff Breyer was his name, and Marvel was his company. And he asked if I'd ever played Stan Laurel. And I said, no, but what do you got? And he said his Oliver Hardy partner, who had worked at Universal for a year or two already, was looking for a new Stan Laurel. And so I remembered enjoying Laurel and Hardy as a kid, but I didn't remember a lot about them. So I put together what I had wardrobe-wise and went up and auditioned. Luckily, because I had it all wrong, luckily the actor playing Oliver Hardy, whose name was Beavis Faversham, knew me from a production of Romeo and Juliet that I had done in Hollywood where I played Mercutio, and he turned to the boss and said, this guy's got talent. I'll put him together. I'll train him. And within a couple of weeks, I got hired, and within a couple of weeks, I was doing a passable Stan Laurel, which was good because very shortly thereafter, I started doing events that Stan Laurel's daughter would attend, Lois Laurel, and even events for the International Sons of the Desert, the official Laurel and Hardy fan club. I'd be sent to those events to play Stanley. So those folk really will scrutinize you. And I had to get my act together quickly and learned very quickly what a genius Stan Laurel was. He not only, starred as the character he developed as Stan Laurel we know, but he also wrote a lot and directed a lot. He really was the brains behind a lot of their films. And, with the new film coming out, I think that'll come out. That a lot of people probably aren't even aware of that. I knew very little about Stan Laurel. I knew very little about Charlie Chaplin before I started playing Charlie. I saw the actor that they used at Universal for years playing Charlie just kind of doing a subpar rendition of Chaplin, and I felt that there needed to be some integrity. So I put my Charlie together, and that made him up his Charlie in quality, and so it was a win-win. So I could also get extra days when he wasn't working. And then a year later after that, I put together playing Groucho Marx. So it's, I think the biggest benefit for me in acting those characters in almost any acting job I get is the research I do. And I learn so much. And that's why I love doing living history and the Renaissance fairs and the Dickens fairs because I get to research. Recently I've been playing Mark Twain, and I've learned so much about Twain. It's amazing. I even have a one-man show based on a part of Twain's life that is often neglected that I can't wait to get mounted. Getting back to your original question, I fell into working at Universal. Then that type of work has taken me around the world. I had my Laurel and Hardy magic show that I co-wrote in the South China Sea, where I took to several countries on cruise ships. I've played Charlie for the Niles SNA Museum Studio in Fremont, California, where Charlie made 5 or 6 films. Groucho has taken me to fundraisers where I actually played for the Marx family at a benefit where we honored the Marx brothers, and to have Groucho's nephew say that I was probably one of the best Grouchos he'd ever seen was, just really hit home. It was really lovely. So I, try to take a lot of care when doing impressions. And I think, which you'll probably get to very soon here is, how did they find me for George McFly and Back to the Future Part 2 and 3? And I think part of the equation was that I was very good and adept at picking up the physicalizations and vocalizations to imitate these classic characters. And because they were trapped or kind of in a corner where they didn't have Crispin Glover because their contract negotiations broke down and they had to have him to recreate these scenes from Part 1 of Back to the Future, they came to me, which I quickly demonstrated I could not only do the impressions, but I could also act and hopefully break some new ground for them.
How, speaking, so now you mentioned Back to the Future. How did it even get to get you to look exactly like him? That must have been a lot of makeup.
Yes, it was. It was about 4 hours of application every morning.
Wow.
I think we got it down to 3.5 eventually. But for all 3 makeups I wore George McFly prosthetics age 17, age 47, and age 77 for 55, 85, and 2015.
Wow. So it's long, tedious hours of application. Yeah. Another hour at the end of a long shoot day to remove the makeup. Yeah. So when they approached you to play the part, how did that make you feel at first? Like when you knew that Crispin wasn't coming back?
Well, I didn't know that Crispin wasn't coming back when actually the same lookalike agent called me asking if I knew who Crispin was. I said, sure. I worked with him on a film at the American Film Institute before he got the first Back to the Future movie. I thought he was a fascinating actor. And I was, what do you got? And he says, well, the production was looking for a photo double for him. And at the time, my ex-wife was having our second child, and I didn't have my medical insurance. I needed the work. And so I was willing to do, this photo double work just to get my hours so I can get my medical coverage. And so I started meeting with casting and then makeup designer Ken Chase and got fitted for these prosthetics and even a body cast for a special effect. And, I was told actually by the makeup designer that Crispin wasn't coming back about a week before the studio even called my theatrical agent to offer a contract. And I was like, well, how are they going to do this without Crispin? And in my mind, they were going to need 2 Georges in the same shot, like they used, Kevin, who doubled Michael J. Fox as a photo double. He would be up on the catwalk when Michael was on stage playing the guitar in the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, or Michael would be up on the catwalk while Kevin was playing guitar on stage. So they would, be able to cheat, and they needed 2 at the same time. Well, I figured that's probably what they needed for George, where in reality, they didn't have George at all. They didn't have Crispin at all, except maybe some close-up shots from the first film, which they used without his permission. That's why he sued, and also for the makeups they put me in.
Wow. So,
but they settled out of court. It never got to court. They saw that they probably wouldn't win and gave him $750,000 to go away.
So pretty much when they brought you on, you didn't even have to audition or anything. They just brought you on and told you this is what you're going to do.
No, I did have to audition.
You did?
Oh yeah, first I met with the assistant directors, and because I had worked with Clint Eastwood on Pale Rider and George Miller on Twilight Zone and a host of other movies and TV shows, they knew I was a credible acting talent. And then because of my lookalike stuff, my abilities, they that was an added bonus. But then I went and had to audition at casting for Feinberg Taylor Casting, and that went well. And then I had to have a screen test in the young George makeup with Bob Zemeckis and Dean Cundy.
Okay. Now, did you study the first film after you knew that you were going to be doing this to see how like Crispin acted in the show or in the movie? I mean,
I think I did watch the film, but after I was cast, I was also given a bunch of old outtakes and screen tests and stuff,
Okay.
and to study more. And that stuff was really fascinating because I was a huge fan of the first film. I mean, who wasn't?
exactly. Yeah.
And when Crispin came on, I was like, hey, I know that guy. He's knocking it out of the park. He's great.
Yeah.
And so I, had already an appreciation for the performance. Crispin had this very unique physicalization where he'd lead with his head, and he had sort of this hunch over. I think maybe because Michael J. Fox was short, and Crispin, is pretty much taller than him. Crispin is even taller than me. So he had certain postures and this strut that he used, and these hand gestures and this quirkiness, and he has a placement of his voice. I did more of that for old George, but as young George, you even hear me say, "Are you okay?" And you hear me do some of the lines.
Yeah.
But I studied those screen tests and makeup tests, and some of the fun things I saw. In one of them, you see Tom Wilson, who played Biff, come up with that line with McFly. What is that? Do you ancestors from an Irish bug or whatever he came up with? So you see the genius of Tom Wilson and Crispin in the screen tests, and Leah and Crispin improvising just so Zemeckis can get an idea of how their relationship is going. Really fun footage that a lot of it hasn't never been released.
Do you have a favorite scene that you were in number 2 or number 3?
I love, of course, the recreation of knocking Biff out in the parking lot fight.
Okay.
I love that. Tom was a wonderful person to work with, and that scene is so iconic, and being able to recreate it, and I'd say 70% of the people out there still don't know that's a different actor.
Yeah.
We nailed it, and it it was tedious, hard, long hours to get it that way, and most actors out there I don't think could do it, and so I felt very honored to be chosen to do it. They were in a corner. They don't necessarily agree with how they did it, and the battle that ensued and all the fallout. I mean, I in fact became collateral damage when it came out that I totally saw Crispin's side of him deserving to get pay for using his likeness and footage.
Yeah.
So that became a sticky point for Universal and me. They saw to it that I didn't get cast again by them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of screwed up. But I got to be a part of this amazing trilogy that the fans, just every generation finds new fans, and the world fans love the cast, and I'm brought to reunions every so often. So that for me is the reward.
Yeah. Well, now I don't think it's ever going to happen, but are you surprised we never saw number 4 as soon as number 3 ended?
No, I'm not surprised. I mean, the trilogy really holds together as a nice little package. I could see maybe the story continuing with Jules and Vern, Doc's kids going back and finding some Michigas and trying to solve that with Chris Lloyd making a cameo or Michael making a cameo or two, but it'd probably have to be a whole new story. I don't see any reason why they would want to remake the original. It kind of
I don't want to see a remake.
Yeah, and there've been a lot of big names interested in playing the role. I know Daniel Radcliffe at one point wanted to play Marty. Other big stars have been open to playing those roles in remakes, but Zemeckis and Bob Gale, they've said adamantly over our dead bodies.
Yeah.
I don't know, once they're gone, if Universal then will retain the rights and say, well, we're going to do it whether you guys like it or not. Meh. It's hard to say.
Yeah, I agree. Do you enjoy doing the reunions and like the Comic Cons to meet the fans?
Oh, how could I not? I'm a real people person. I love people. While working at Universal, I learned to greet in 15 different languages. I love world culture, and when folk from other countries know that you've made an attempt to at least greet them in their own language, they open up and become very friendly, and it's just a whole world of loveliness opens. And when I do fan events in other countries or even here locally, I see example babies in strollers who are bored out of their minds sometimes, and I learned how to make balloon animals while on the job,
Wow.
at Universal. So I'll make the kid a balloon animal, and the kid will be happy, the parents will be happy. I'll autograph a picture for the parent who grew up with those films, and it meant a special thing to them as part of their life, and they're happy. So everybody's happy, and then I get to meet often my idols. I was gobsmacked when I met Sir Derek Jacobi at London Comic Con, my first one, and was able to rub elbows with my heroes, and Leonard Nimoy and various other big stars that I've loved over the years. Being able to sit with them as a peer and talk shop is just incredibly rewarding. Then to be kind of, friendly with these fans who just are in shock meeting me. I pinch myself going, okay, it's just me, but they are happy, and that makes me happy.
Yeah. Now, yeah, you're right, because I've been to 3 Comic Cons that came locally in my area, and this past one that I just went to, I took the wife and we went. I wanted to meet Ralph Macchio from The Karate Kid, and there was a couple other guys that we met, and even Henry Winkler was there, great guy to meet. And then there was another person, I don't want to mention names. It kind of felt like he didn't even want to be there. So I was like disappointed. I met this person that I enjoyed watching in the 80s growing up, and it wasn't the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sometimes the celebs don't want to be there, but they're contractually obligated, or they need the money, or what have you. I know I need the money, but when you see that, it's very disappointing. Did you by chance mention to Ralph? Well, I guess it's probably a sore subject, but Marty McFly was offered to Ralph.
Really? I never knew that.
That was my understanding. I believe he turned it down. They wanted Michael from the go-get, and when they couldn't get Michael because the producers of
Family Guys
wouldn't let him out of the contract, they wouldn't even let him know about the project. They started hunting around, for other Q-rated actors of that period, and I know they even auditioned Johnny Depp for George McFly. That would have been an interesting film with Ralph Macchio and Johnny Depp. And Crispin, I'm sorry,
Ralph Macchio.
Christopher Lloyd actually threw the script away originally.
Wow.
And when they didn't hear back from Chris Lloyd, they were looking at Dudley Moore, John Lithgow, who was taking a year off, and Jeff Goldblum for Doc Brown. It's a very fascinating how castings go. And, everyone knows they got Eric Stoltz shot for about 7 weeks or 8 weeks with Eric before, they were like, this isn't a drama. We need some more lightness to this. And Michael all of a sudden became available, and they switched gears to get who they wanted originally back. And, I'm sure it was embarrassing for Eric. But at least, they stuck by their guns and knew what they wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, and I did read that he was filming Back to the Future and Family Ties at the same time.
The same during part 2.
Yeah.
He was doing the last season of Family Ties while we were shooting with him, often at night or on the weekends.
Wow. I don't know how he did it. That's a lot of work.
I asked him, I said, Michael, where would you when do you get to sleep?
Yeah.
And he said, oh, in the limousines in between the studios on those limo rides. It's like, no wonder you named your kid after your chauffeur.
So, you teach acting also. How did you how did you decide you wanted to teach acting?
Well, once again, out of necessity, a character actor, I don't do the leads as much anymore. I'm happy to, but I don't have maybe the chiseled looks or Q rating that most film productions want for a lead. Once in a while, I'll still get a lead. But as a character actor, the parts are not all that frequent, and especially since I'm not based in LA, I won't keep an LA agent because I can't be available for an audition at the drop of a hat. So, I mean, I'll still come to LA for work, but most of the time, things that are cast, it's kind of, once again, few and far between. So I need to supplement my income with what I know, and I know acting. I've studied a lot of different techniques, from Meisner to Strasbergian method to Stella Adler actions and Uta Hagen. I know a good sampling of a lot of different techniques, so I can expose my students to a little bit of each. The exercises that seem to resonate with them, and find what works, and then we'll continue working with them in those frames, in those techniques, because I can't really take the cultish, this is the only technique that you should be studying, this is the only thing that works. Everyone's wired differently, and people have different things that resonate for them. And I'm a strong advocate of exposing yourself to the different techniques and finding what works. I have several techniques that I find work almost with everyone. For example, a cold reading technique that I teach is really remarkable for freeing up yourself of self-consciousness and connecting with your scene partner while the text is living. Some really great things that I bring to my classes.
What's the one best advice that you give to a student that wants to become like an actor in Hollywood?
Find something practical to make a living with.
Okay.
Make a foundation there in whatever it can be, a vocation other than acting, because very, very few actors make a living at it. So if you can be a chef, if you can be an attorney, if you can be a doctor, be a broker, whatever you can, have that as a foundation. Put enough money aside to take maybe pilot season off, or take a year off to really go wholeheartedly into acting, or just do it part-time with great photos, build up your resume, get training, and then ask the hard questions when people start saying, I could represent you, and ask, okay, show me what you've done, and make sure they're legit. There's too many scams out there for hungry wannabes, and that's another big thing that I have actors, I have to coach actors on. A lot of actors also, I see, make it these days because they're really driven. I mean, so much that they are always networking, they're living it all the time, and they cut through the chase. They're very aggressive.
Okay.
And sometimes that's the way to be, because it's very cutthroat, and there's so much production out there. It's hard to find the stuff that is going to pay and that is going to be really quality stuff, because you want to work on quality stuff so you can keep building your resume, building your reputation, and building your demo reel.
What's the best advice that you received when you were going through the whole acting?
I was a kid,
Yeah.
and I think I just graduated. Oh my gosh, what was it? 5th grade or 6th grade, and an episode of the FBI was shooting in my neighborhood. It was really fun in the park there. There was an armored truck wreck, and Efren Zimbalist Jr. was there, and the actors were out, and the crew was out, and I introduced myself to. I remember Monty Markham, an actor who I'd seen on other TV shows, was there as the guest star, and I introduced myself. I said I recognized him, told him what show I knew him from, and he liked that, and I said I'm going to be an actor. And he said, "Oh yeah, that's great." And he got called to set, and this other character actor said, "Yeah, what do you got there, kid? Is that your report card?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Let me take a look." He says, "Whoa, there you go. There's a B in English, and there's a, a B in science. What's this D in math? You can't get a D in math, kid. How are you going to know if your agent's cheating you or not? You got to be better in math." So I think that was pretty good advice.
What do you think has been the hardest role that you've played so far in your career?
Gosh, well, there's been quite a few that have been challenging. A couple years ago, in an independent film that's streaming on Amazon called Savior of None, I play a widower, very depressed epileptic befriends an adolescent girl who's being abused in the foster care system and by the local gang. And my character becomes her avenging angel. So that was very hard because the script called for me to have one grand mal seizure, and I ended up having a second grand mal seizure because it just was right for the intensity of the scene where the character drives this girl away. And as soon as the door shuts, I flew back and went right into an epileptic seizure. It was like, okay, it's like that improv stuff. Let it move in if it's there. Yeah. And luckily, the director and cameraman, stayed with me and followed. And the scene is very potent. So that was a big challenge, doing a role that had all this physicalization, had all this emotional stuff, had a very important story to tell, had to then become sort of amoral and being an avenging angel, taking out the rapists and so on and so forth. And that's not generally my nature. I'm not a violent person. I don't have epilepsy. I am not very all the time depressed. So I had to really dig deep, physicalize, and bring this character to life and be believable, not too over the top, because it's on film and it's really easy to overact on film. So, and also it was an extremely low, no budget film. And so I was dealing with long hours with not the greatest food and rest. So it was a hell of a challenge, but it came out great.
So what do you think has been your favorite character that you performed? Would you say it's George McFly?
I wish I could. I wasn't given a lot of liberty to develop like I have been on other films. Okay. They first of all wanted to keep me a secret. Spielberg and Gale and Zemeckis and Canton, Marshall and Kennedy, they kind of wanted to keep it low key, that it wasn't the original actor after they had already promised everyone the original cast are coming back. So they certainly didn't want to bring attention to me, and they certainly didn't want Crispin to see that they used his likeness in the makeups because, as everyone knows, he got upset and sued. So I wasn't really given the liberty to develop much. I got a couple of things in as old George in 2015, some comedy stuff that mostly got cut out. Eating a banana upside down was very funny because the peel kept slapping me and rotating my axis for dinner and going, "4." That was cut. That's in the bonus materials. So it wasn't necessarily George, but I did do a film. Now it's a cult classic because you can't find it anywhere except I think you can get a copy for $100 on Amazon of a film called Corked, which was another very low budget mockumentary on the wine world, in which I play an obsessive compulsive winemaker. And the liberty I had in that film, first of all, I'm playing this guy who doesn't allow anything from picking of the grapes to the crush to the bottling to the cellaring and selling. He doesn't let anyone do anything but him, and he's obsessive about it. And it was a really fun comedic character to find the quirks. And I also was able to work with the writers and directors and come up with about 30% new stuff based on what was inspired by the script. I would use my improv muscle and say, how about if we try this? How about we try this? And almost 90% of the time they said, sure. And a lot of it got left in the film. And a lot of it's very funny. It really worked out. The film's a little uneven because it's, not a Hollywood production. And there's inconsistent on the talent levels that are in it. but I think ultimately it's a really fun film, and especially if people like wine and the wine industry and can laugh at themselves, it's a wonderful film.
So you've done a lot of interviews and podcasts. What's something that you wish you got asked that you never get asked?
Ooh, oh, that's something. I think you just asked it. I, I'm not sure what question I would want to be asked. I have, as you say, done a lot of podcasts and vlogs and so on and so forth, where I'm asked pretty much the same questions over and over about the Back to the Future stuff, because that's the most pop thing I've done. I think, though, what you ask about, the things that actors would need. I mean, I like that because I like to give to others of my actor family, and don't want necessarily them to fall into the same traps that I had. Never pay for an audition, never go into something that's promising you a role in something that you're paying for workshops first. That's often a scam. I'm happy to give tips and advice. People can reach me right through my website. I'm not in hiding.
You mentioned you're writing a book. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Yeah, I've got a lot of stories. I was raised in the weird 60s, where I think we were caught as a society between very kind of oppressive Victorian ethics of the 50s and a lot of, strict dogma, to my older brother and sister being there in the heart of the sexual revolution and the anti-Vietnam movement and the civil rights movement. So it was a really interesting time to be a kid, to see all the adults trying to figure out what is the right path here. And then there were a lot of adults living this drug culture. Prescription drugs, especially in Hollywood, were rampant. And it's, if you see the adults doing drugs to maintain their composure, no wonder kids in the 70s really took off with smoking pot, and then what came next, angel dust, and then the cocaine epidemic and the crack epidemic. Our drug culture caused a lot of really severe behaviors in both my peers and the adults. And so I have chapters on all that in my upbringing, and then chapters on the different awakenings in my life, both spiritually and sexually, and I touch on everything, even the pets in my life. I have a great fondness for the domestic pets that my family kept, and keeping their memories alive is one way that I do it, by writing, and then of course all my Hollywood stories. Gosh, never ending. I'm up to, like you say, 65,000 words, and I still feel I'm just at the tip of the iceberg.
When is your goal to try to release this?
Oh, I'd say 50 years after my death. I don't want some of my friends and relatives to hear some of the things I have to say, because it's kind of truthful. And a lot of the time, truth is stranger than fiction and hard to hear. Yeah. But no, I don't know. I'll probably release sections when I'm ready. Give me another year or two.
There you go. And lastly, how can the listeners find you on social media?
Well, I'm on Instagram, Jeffrey J. Weissman. I'm on Twitter as JEF Weissman, at JEF Weissman. I have a Jeffrey Weissman fan page on Facebook. My personal page, Facebook, has been filled to the 5,000 max for 7 years. Every once in a while, someone from my past creeps up, and I have to excuse a fan or someone I don't know that well to add a cousin or a family member or friend that I've reconnected with. That's ultimately very frustrating. And like I say, I have my website, jeffreyweissman.com, which needs a new webmaster. If anyone out there wants to help me, I sure could use it. But people can email me there. They can order, an autographed picture very inexpensively, and I'm reachable there for bookings.
Right.
I like I say, I perform wherever I can now. I do living history. Just last week, we did a Back to the Future 3 themed fundraiser for Michael's Parkinson's Research Foundation, where we shot the films up in Sonora, up in the Gold Country. There were 4 days for fans from around the world came in and relived Back to the Future Part 3.
Wow.
We had the first night was a campfire eat out where we then all took lanterns and found the mine where the DeLorean time machine had been buried, stashed away. We did a parade. We had a screening of the film where the film was shot in Red Hills. Terry and Oliver Holler, who are tothefuture.org, who've built their own time machine DeLorean, have taken it to every state and many different countries now to raise money for Parkinson's, designed this event as a fan event that hopefully will be reoccurring. So at the last minute, Dean Cundy, our cinematographer on all 3 films, was able to attend. And then I also helped them bring in Marvin J. McIntyre, who played The Undertaker in Part 3, came out from New York. So the fans who came in from Russia and Denmark and France and really all over the place just had the time of their life. It was really a once-in-a-lifetime type of event.
Wow. Well, that's fun. I want to personally thank you for coming on. This was so much fun listening to your stories.
Yeah, I didn't get you to talk much. We'll have to interview you for one of these.